Let me introduce you to events in JavaScript. And a lot of people think events are super complicated, but essentially they are really, really easy. What is an event? The easiest way to really show you is by just creating a button. And this button will, for example, have a text that is click me, for example. And now this button will also have an ID of btn, for example. So we really keep this one simple. So what would be an event in this case? An event is pretty much anything that is happening on a page. An event can be a click, for example. An event can be you scrolling. An event can you be typing in input. So an event is essentially just anything that you do on the page. So actually an event can be anything. And you can decide which kind of event you want to grab inside of JavaScript and what you want to do when this event occurs. So we could, for example, say, okay, we want to react to a button click. And if we want to do something, when a button click occurs, we have to add an event listener. So something listens to this event. Once this event happens, we are listening to the event and we can say, okay, now that this event occurred, we want to do something. In order to listen to an event, to a button event, for example, we first need to get a reference to the button. So we say const btn is equal to document get element by ID. We want to get our button. So now that we have a reference to this button right here, we need to add an event listener to this button because we want to say listen to all of the events that happen or to a specific event that happens for this button. So we can say button.add event listener. Now you have to use opening and closing brackets. This is a method. Instead of this method, you first have to define the type of event that you want to listen to. And there exist a lot of predefined types of events and you just have to remember them essentially. But I'm also going to be honest, the most important event that you'll always use is going to be the click event. So we'll define the event by using opening and closing brackets. And here you can see a lot of events, but you won't really need any of those ones besides a few. So the click event, as I said, is really important. So we can define that we want to listen to a click event for this button, for example. So once the user clicks on this button, we want to do something. What do we want to do? That is the second argument. So this here's the listener. Once the user clicks on a button, we want to execute this callback function right here. And for example, we can just say we want to console.log clicked, for example. And obviously this logic right here can be a lot more complex, but let's just keep it simple to really understand what is going on. And as you can see, if we are going into the console right now, we can say click me. And as you can see, this one has been clicked right now. Also, something that's really important, you're also getting an event object every time you're adding an event listener. So you can get this one, but we don't really need it in this case, so I didn't specify it right here. But I just want to make sure that you know that this is possible. And we can also just say that we want to log this event right here once we click on this button. So we can, for example, now click on a button. And as you can see, we're getting this pointer event right here. But in our case, it does not make sense. But for the next thing that we want to do, it might make sense. So maybe we also want to track the user input in an input field. So we are going to say we want to create an input field of type text. This one has an ID, for example, of username. So let's pretend this here is the username. Now we're going to get a reference by saying const username is going to be equal to document.getElement by ID of username. So now we have a reference to our username. And now we want to add an event listener to this username input field. And we want to see what kind of input the user types in there. Or we want to track that. So we say username.add event listener. In this scenario, we maybe want to listen to the input event because the user types in some input. And right here, we can actually say that we want to get the event or the event object, but I'm going to say this one here is E. And this is also a convention. So a lot of people say that this here is just E. And now we can also just say, let's add console.log and let's just add our E. So our event. Now let's type some stuff in here. And as you can see, we're getting this input event. So now we have a lot of stuff in here. And something that you'll use very often is this target property right here. So e.target, for example. And as you can see, you have really a lot of properties in here. But one of the properties that is really important in there is the value property. But let me first of all show you e.target. So we'll access inside of this object, the target property. And this target object has the value property. So now let's save that one. And now let me type something in. And as you can see, we're getting the value as an output in the console. Let me show you one more event that might be kind of important. So let's, for example, say we create a form of type post. And inside of this form, we are going to have a submit button. So button:submit. And usually when you press a button, so let's just say submit. And usually when you press a button, you will have a reload of the page. So take a look at the top right here. If I'm going to submit right here, you can see we're getting a reload and the page isn't working. So maybe this is something that you don't want to have, because this here is the default behavior of HTML elements. So we are going to grab this form by saying this one has an ID of form, for example. So let's keep it simple. And we're going to say const form is going to be equal to document get element by ID of form. Now we are getting our form. We are going to add an event listener by saying form.add event listener. What kind of event do we want to listen to? We want to listen to a submit event, because right here the user is submitting data. So we are going to say submit is the event that we're looking for. We are again going to get our event object right here. And now if you want to prevent the default behavior of reloading, for example, you can use e.preventDefault, which is a method, and we'll end that statement by using a semicolon. So now let me show you, once I press the submit button, nothing is happening. So now we could also say right here, console.log, we clicked, and we're going to go in here. And as you can see, we clicked will appear in the console, but we will prevent the default behavior of reloading the page once we submit, essentially. And that is something that is pretty useful, especially if you want to define all of your logic yourself instead of JavaScript, for example. So now we could also say that we want to create an alert, for example, that says, hey, yo, or wayo, doesn't really matter. Now we're going to click, and as you can see, we're getting this alert that has the message wayo, for example. So those are the most important events. I actually never really used a lot more myself. So I think if you know them, you're really good to go. But just keep in mind that there exist a lot more events, and maybe in the future you might need some, and then you can always go and take a look at the documentation.